Hi, Shahab, Dan Schoenfrey, and myself, we did a study on gender differences in hallway proximity, which was a social psychology study on the relationship between human interaction and personal and intimate space. Some background information before we started our experiment include the KNAPP study of nonverbal communication and human interaction, which was a hallmark study in social psychology done in 1972, which suggested that males were more likely to respond negatively, like moving away or responding negatively verbally or physically to an invasion of space as opposed to women. Therefore, women were more likely to allow the intrusion of their intimate space. A related study done in 2000 by Siobhan and Naidoo of University of Pennsylvania was titled Gender, Ethnicity, Intimacy, and Proxemics, which tested Knapp's conclusions that he found by testing conversations and actually touching someone and invading their intimate and personal space. Personal space is defined as anywhere from 18 inches to 2 feet away, whereas intimate space is from 0 to 18 inches away. The results were in contrast to Knapp's findings that males were actually more likely to be willing to have their space invaded as opposed to women. So we were interested in the subject, and we decided to take a study, do a study ourselves to see how QO students would react if we invaded their personal space. And we were curious about gender differences. Mainly, we thought that men were more likely to elicit a negative response when their personal space was invaded as opposed to women. And our independent variable was gender. We were trying to compare male and female differences, and we measured this, our dependent variable, with an observation of a negative response. And Jihad, a negative response?
Negative responses that we saw were like people would divert their eyes, they would move away from me, they would stop talking with their friends and because it was awkward. They would change their facial expressions to like disgust. They would just stare at me and they would like tense their body. Some neutral responses we saw were they would be polite and try to be nice. They wouldn't like show any anger. Their body remained relaxed. And they just they seemed a little confused and their eyes didn't divert.
So our experimental group were the 24 QO students who, while eating lunch, Shahab, our Confederate, approached, and it was on May 19, 2008. Our control group was not needed because all we were doing was comparing the male and female groups together. To perform the experiment, actually, we during the lunch period on May 19th, we had Shahab, our Confederate, approach randomly selected people in the hallways eating lunch, and he just basically sat down next to them, and just bumped up next to them like this, and just sat there next to them. They were complete and total strangers, so they did not know how to react. And we measured based on what they did, if it was a negative or a neutral response, and these notes were taken by Adam and I, who were in the shadows. Just taking the notes. And after Shahab was, after about 30 seconds, when Shahab was done, Adam and I walked over, and with Shahab we debriefed him on the situation. We told him that it was a proximity experiment for psych, and asked for permission to use their data in our project. And yeah.
We found that 2/3 of the males showed a negative response, while only 1/4 of the females showed a negative response.
Okay.
Our statistical hypotheses were the null hypothesis, which is there's no difference in responses between males and females when their personal space is invaded. And the alternate hypothesis is when there is a difference in response by males and females when their personal space is invaded, and males elicit more negative responses than females.
So basically, the statistical hypotheses for the null hypothesis, PM, which stands for proportion of males with negative responses, minus the proportion of females with negative responses equaled 0, so there was no difference. And for the alternate, that the proportion of males with negative responses was greater than the proportion of females with negative responses. And we did a chi-squared test for homogeneity, as you can see over here. Our observed data was that 8 out of 12 males had a negative response, and 4 out of 12 males had a neutral response. 3 out of 12 females had a negative response, and 9 out of 12 females had a neutral response. That was a total of 24. To calculate the expected, we took the row and the column and those stats and divided it by the total, which we learned in stat class. So for the males, negative response was 5.5, female was 5.5. The neutral response for males was 6.5, and the same for females at 6.5. In order to, and we found that degrees of freedom was 1, which is the column, which is the number of columns, which is 2 minus 1, and the number of rows, which is 2 minus 1, so that equals 1. And we used the alpha level of 0.05 to determine the statistical significance. And in order to perform a chi-squared test, you have to find the sum of the observed minus expected stats squared divided by the expected. So we did 8 minus 5.5 squared divided by 5.5, plus 3 minus 5.5 squared divided by 5.5, plus 4 minus 6.5 squared divided by 6.5, plus 9 minus 6.5 squared divided by 6.5. That gave us a chi-squared value of 4.1958, roughly. In order to find the p-value of this, you had to do a chi-squared CDF in the calculator, which is 4.1958, comma 9999, comma 1, the degrees of freedom. And that gave us a p-value of 0.040524. This p-value is less than 0.05, so we can conclude that the data is significant, meaning that it is most likely not due to chance. And so because of this, we can conclude that the null hypothesis is incorrect and that the alternate hypothesis should be assumed true, which was the fact that there is a difference between responses between females and males. And we found, and on the chart, the chi-squared critical value chart, at a alpha level of 0.05, looking at our data, and with degrees of freedom of 1, the significant region starts at the chi-squared significant value of 3.84. So on the chart, you can see that 3.84, the chi-squared significance value, is actually greater than the chi-squared value we found up here, which is 4.19. That is within the rejection region, so we conclude that the data is not due to chance and is significant.
So in conclusion, we found in our experiment that males are more likely to elicit a negative response in response to an invasion of personal space than females. There exists an association, however, there is no definite causation.
But there may be some confounding variables. Some are like, we did it after HSAs, so most of the people that we used were underclassmen and there were no seniors. We had a very small sample size. We only used people from QOHS. There may be some situational factors and individual temperaments. Me being a man may have created a different response than if we had a female doing this. And it could have been very subjective because we are, it was like us observing the responses, so there could have been some research bias there.
However, the overall significance of our study really highlights the importance of nonverbal communication and human interaction and the way we form new relationships. We found that the violation of proxemic norms, going too close to someone, really makes them feel uneasy and uncomfortable. So therefore, in men more so than women even, that we found, it damages the ability to make relationships, and it increases stress levels and a sense of uneasiness in the subjects. Therefore, being able to recognize this pattern and being cognizant that invading personal space is a violation of a norm allows us to make more relationships, more healthy relationships, because we are more aware of other people's needs in personal space. So invading a man's personal space may elicit a more negative response. So by knowing this, we can avoid invading people's personal spaces. Not just men, but also women, because it tends to increase uneasiness in both, but especially men based on the results of our study. And the end.